So the other day I got a comment on one of my videos and it actually got me kind of thinking on this subject as a whole, and it kind of made me think, is MTG Arena pay to win? And this is definitely one of those things that is definitely decisive in both regards of digital magic and or physical magic in some sort of way. Is the game technically a pay to win style kind of game? And in this thinking process, it kind of got me thinking, kind of both sides of the fence, being someone who has played a more free to play style of Magic in one form when I first started playing back in the day, to someone who currently is in a decent position to kind of invest a little bit into the game overall and help build up my overall collection. With that being said, guys, if you like this video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, wanting to post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. It puts a +1+1 counter on this video to help the YouTube algorithm and whatnot. With that being said, guys, let's just dive in and let's just talk about it. So, right as I start recording this video, I actually started a poll on my channel, and I'm going to try to post a little snippet kind of like right about here, just kind of show you kind of like, even in the first like half hour of this post that I posted on my community tab, which I kind of try to do as much as possible, asking just in general, is MTG physical or digital pay to win? And even the results right now is showing that, it's about 67%, people have saying that yes, it is. 33% are saying, or 29% are saying no, and 5% are saying other, in a sort of way, with some interesting ideas on comments of what they think and what their reason is about it possibly being pay to win and whatnot. But in my regards, I do think this is kind of one of those things. If we're talking about in an MTG Arena aspect compared to its physical counterpart, I do think it's not as pay to win as its physical counterpart, in the essence that the game does give you some free cards in the starter decks that you unlock initially in the tutorial challenge, and then the additional starter decks you unlock as you play, the certain quests as you pop them up and unlock various different decks that kind of actually have synergies with the current standard meta going on as a whole. And I do think as we get into near rotation, we're going to get new starter decks that are going to be more up to date, having newer cards, so you're not going to be stuck in the mud if all you've been playing is a starter deck. So that is definitely a good benefit, I do think, compared to its physical counterpart, where if you have a deck that is currently standard legal, come September, some of those cards may not be standard legal anymore. So if you want to continue to play standard, you have to invest more money to replace the cards and or build a whole new deck completely. So that's kind of my one aspect of kind of like, I do think at least the digital version of Magic the Gathering is a little bit better in that aspect of not being as pay to win, as you don't have to, technically, if you don't want to, you could physically play Magic the Gathering Arena and you don't actually have to invest a single dime out of your own pocket. There is a free to play way to play Magic the Gathering Arena, build a decent sized collection, build a good amount of currency, and kind of overall, have an abundance of cards from all the more recent sets, all the cards you need and whatnot. And it does take some time. Definitely it's a challenge being a newer player, getting used to certain things in the game. It takes a lot of learning, and I do think that's kind of another aspect of the game overall as a whole. Outside of the initial color challenge, which gives you kind of the basics of how to play Magic the Gathering, there's not really much in a way, if you're a newer player, really to understand how is my opponent playing these decks that are super strong, have all these rares and mythics and things like that in it. How do I go about upgrading maybe a deck that I'm currently playing? There's just certain aspects of the game I feel like the game just kind of leaves out, and I definitely could see someone who's a free-to-play player, or even someone who's on a budget, not really understanding how to kind of progress themselves even further. And I've been asked a couple of times, what should I do after I, complete the tutorials and get the starter decks? Where should I improve? And I've definitely, on this channel, I've definitely made some starter deck upgrades. So if you're someone who likes to play the starter decks and looking for ways to upgrade them, I have made videos on the channel. I may post, the playlist with some of the my new player, new player decks and new player, discussions, talking about various aspects of the game and whatnot. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a card somewhere on the screen. But with that being said, other than that, outside of using your own time and trying to find this information, it's definitely one of those things, without doing your own research, you're not really going to learn anymore. And the other aspect of the game, I do think that sometimes I don't, some people don't understand, is Magic the Gathering is kind of a game that you kind of pick up and you definitely build skill in the more you play it. Being someone who's played Magic the Gathering for over almost 20 years at this point, there's definitely a lot that I still don't know about the game and whatnot. Sometimes you see new card sequences that you may have not even realized was a thing, whether it's physical and or digital, just because certain cards get introduced and they create new little interactions and things like that within the decks themselves. These cool combos that you could definitely do that you definitely wouldn't have done before, unless this new sort of coming to the battlefield effect or something pops up. It definitely creates some interesting aspects. And that's one of those things, as a Magic player, you always want to be on the learn in. You watch your opponent play, you kind of learn from them, whether they're playing a deck that you may want to eventually build, or it's something from, that you just kind of want to pick up in general. You may see your opponent not play their land immediately when they start their turn. They go in for attacks, and after their first attack, then they actually play their land, then they play their card. It's definitely like these interactions that you kind of have to pick up on over time. Also, if you're, trying to play Magic competitively in this aspect, I do think this is one of those things that you need to pick up on how people play certain decks. And I do think it's one of those things, being a newer player, if you don't understand this, you may actually feel like these players are doing things that are kind of broken and or unfair. And I do think, because the game doesn't explain to you what these other aspects of, and I know it's hard for the game to have all these different tutorials, but I don't think there's any other resource, whether in the Arena client itself, other than maybe clicking on one of the MTG screens that pop up on the main screen. I don't think there's really a source in the game itself that kind of can bring you to an article or something like that on Magic's website to kind of help you kind of understand a rule in or something like that. And there's no way for you to go back unless you record your games really to understand maybe what you may have done wrong in a previous game and whatnot. And I definitely know it's definitely hard. I know I've heard that this game is kind of like on a shoestring budget of they barely just get the game good to go with the newest set whenever they are released. So it's definitely it's definitely a lot of big ask, but I do think it's one of those things that people need to unfortunately, they have to kind of do a lot of their own research. And because a lot of times you're playing this game alone, you're not going to be able to ask your friend, hey, what did I do wrong there? Or why can't I do this? Or why does this work this way? And I do think it's one of those aspects that Magic the Gathering physically kind of benefits from. It's, having that social interaction. So whether you're playing, in a tournament, or whether you're just playing amongst friends, if you try to do something and it doesn't actually work out, at least you have the other person probably telling you like, hey, this doesn't work because of this. Most of the time, most people are relatively friendly, especially if they know you're a newer player. Though you do get those jerks sometimes who do like to take advantage of playing against a newer player. I've been guilty of this when I was younger, and I was kind of, in my teens, and it was kind of like the idea of like I had a good deck, and I knew my deck was a lot better than a lot of other people's decks. But it's one of those things you kind of learn and build up from. That's why I guess it's weird that now later, a few years later, I'm creating a channel that's trying to help newer players get acclimated to the game and kind of help them out, help them get started and whatnot in Magic the Gathering. But kind of getting distracted there, but getting kind of back onto the subject. So we get to that as being one aspect of why the game sometimes feels pay to win. You play like a starter deck, you play a deck that is full of rares and mythics. It just feels like a disadvantage the whole time, and it's definitely not a fun aspect to be just steamrolled over and over again. So I do get that. I don't know if Magic could do this, but in a weird way, I feel like there's somehow like a way, like I remember Call of Duty doing this back in the day. If there was like a way to kind of get into like lobbies with like newer players to the game, and the way they could probably I feel like I know there's ways to kind of get around this if you're a player who's experienced and you want to stomp on newer players. I do think there's like a way, especially if you're playing like starter decks or something, like just to only get teamed up against other people who are playing starter decks or playing decks with like limited amount of rares or something like that, or just even like a new player like tournament that you can join. I don't really know. I'm just thinking, spitballing some ideas. I mean, if you have any ideas of what you think that they could do to help newer players kind of get acclimated or play against other players who are still newer to the game, leave a comment down below. It definitely helps, me kind of understand what you guys are looking for when it comes to Magic Arena or Magic in general. I mean, granted, I'm not anybody who can, give this feedback, but I feel like, whoever may see this could see these comments and may get some ideas of what they could do to improve upon. Other than that, the other aspects of pay to win is it's definitely an interesting one. I do think in certain forms, I guess the pay aspect of MTG Arena is that essentially paying any sort of real money, whether it's digital or even physical, is that you just kind of get the cards sooner. I honestly don't think just because people have good cards makes them a good Magic player. I've seen people who have like top meta decks that are stomping the tournament scene or something like that, just not be able to play them properly in sort of ways. They make a lot of misplays. They don't understand how certain cards work or certain interactions with. I've seen this myself when I play against certain people, and I feel like they kind of do things out of turn of how the deck's overall supposed to work. And I do think that comes from someone who thinks that just because they have a good pile of cards means that they're going to win every single game. And it's one of those things. I do think Magic's a game where you just need time to learn how to play properly, and you kind of see how certain interactions work, whether it's you've done it yourself or you see your opponent who may be playing a similar deck do something. You're like, oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. And I do think that's one of those things that the game, unfortunately, you really can't teach. I do think it's one of those things that it just takes time to kind of pick up on when it comes to things like that. And I do think I think that's like the main reason why a lot of people feel like the game's pay to win. It's just because there's an aspect that you can just buy packs, you can buy cosmetics, and cosmetics really don't do anything. Cosmetics just make your cards look fancy. To be honest, I've seen people who have fancy looking cards and yet again terrible Magic the Gathering player. Just because your cards look cool doesn't mean the cards do cooler things than they originally were printed as. So I mean, yet again, it's another aspect of, just because you can spend money doesn't mean you are good with that spent money in a way. It's sometimes it's money wasted at the end of the day. Like, I mean, you can build a deck that's just full of uncommons. Build Boros Cycling. It's one of the cheapest decks I think you can make in Arena that's actually relatively competitive in the meta scene. It's just a pile of commons and uncommons that you just cycle and just do a big Zenith flare to your opponent's face, and if your opponent's not playing any single counters or any sort of way to like really gain life, you just stomp them that way. So it's definitely one of those things, understanding like the game outside of just what the game kind of teaches you is kind of one of those things that also probably doesn't help a newer player or a player who is new to card games in general understand like on different aspects on how they can improve their gameplay. Like I don't think MTG Arena really posts anything on any of their screens here other than, hey, here's how you can spend some money, here's how you can spend some money, here's some latest deck lists if you want to find some latest winning deck lists. But it doesn't really have, anywhere for you to kind of go and find more information on how to like improve yourself. You can go to your decks, you can go to packs, mastery, store, and whatnot. I guess you can go to learn more, and it kind of talks about various things, but it doesn't really advertise it. It's not like Sparky's coming up and it's like, hey, here's where you can learn more things. But yet again, I do think it's one of those things that they need to make more available to someone who's new to the game, because after you kind of get out of the tutorial challenge, you would have no idea that going to the question mark would probably get you to here. I actually had no idea this was actually going to pop up here. So yet again, it shows you just how obvious or not obvious certain things are. And I do think, especially being a newer, this is definitely something they should have more available to that newer player. But guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you have any feedback you want to give me about this video, whether what you think they could improve upon overall in MTG Arena, let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, want to post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, I'll see you in the next video. But first, before I head out, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to all the channel members here on the screen that you see pop up here. I thank each one of you guys who decided to, join the channel by clicking the join button or clicking the link down in the description below. It definitely means a lot to me. But until next time, I'll see you later.